Good afternoon, everybody who's attending this afternoon. My name is James Pickering. I'm Sales Director in Jigsaw 24. My job today is to host the first in a series of 3 customer-led or customer-designed webinars in what we're calling our Mac user experience session. So we've got 3 webinars. Today, the first, obviously, being moving to Mac. The second one, which is on the 22nd of June, so next Wednesday, supporting Mac users, and the third session on the 28th, which is delivering the ultimate Mac user experience. I'm joined by 2 of my colleagues today, and these 2 guys will be doing most of the talking. As I say, my job is purely to host today. I have Richard Poth with us. I'll let Richard introduce himself properly in a second, but Richard is one of our professional development consultants, and interestingly, an Apple professional learning specialist, which is a title bestowed on him by Apple. We're quite proud to have Richard in our business. He does a great job for us. You'll hear some of his experiences later on. We also have Jack Hollister. Jack is one of our, or is our primary lead in the technical space for our Workplace Solutions. And Jack and Richard between them will deliver the majority of the session. We're intending to run on for about 45 minutes. It is we'd like it to be, we'd like you to be involved. We'd like you to ask questions. There is a Q&A option on Zoom, as you can probably see, and we'll open up at the end as well, of course, if anybody else wants to ask anything specific. So questions through the session on the Q&A, and at the end we have an open forum to ask a few more questions. 45 minutes or so. We'll go as quickly or as slowly as you need. If there's anything you need, I think there's a raise hand button as well. Please press that, and we have another colleague on a web who's sat in the background at the minute who will collate those questions and update us if anybody gets anything particularly to raise. Okay, enough from me. Over to you, Richard and Jack.
Thanks, James. Thanks very much. Hi, yes, everyone. I'm Richard Poth, and as James mentioned there, I'm one of the professional development consultants at Jigsaw 24. I get to work with, well, basically you guys in terms of supporting you in how to use the Mac technologies and how you can use it in the workplace. I work a lot in education, so that's kind of what I do. So and today we're going to have basically we're going to do this as a conversation. So I'm going to ask Jack, because Jack being the expert in the field, I'm going to ask him lots of questions, and then hopefully we can really show you what the Mac can offer. So Jack, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jack Hollister, that's the lead for Workplace Solutions. My job at Jigsaw is working with customers and with the business, building out what our solutions are with the different vendors that we work alongside, all sort of being powered by Apple. And we'll cover a couple of those technologies over the conversation of today.
All right, so well, let's get started, Jack. With I think the first question we really need to ask is, what is Apple at work? So, quite a simple question. So I think it's a good place to start.
Yeah, I suppose if we look at where Apple's sat within the industry over the last 10, 20 years, been very creative focused, sat within that side of the business, generally outside the reins of central management, and for a lot of businesses, sort of slowly grown in the background. I think Apple at work is the fact that Apple's taken business very, very seriously, taking on the enterprise, being able to give a device to customers to actually work alongside their PC counterparts. Especially when we look at employee choice, so asking employees about what devices they would want to use on their day-to-day. I think the statistic that's kicked around is 70% of employees would choose an Apple device. So Apple at work is that whole practice of what it means for that device to exist in the business, the support wrap around that, and the support wrap around that, and the technology that sits internally and externally.
Okay, so I mean, you talk about that choice. So why should organisations then look at these choice programs that we're offering? What would be the reason?
Well, there's a fair few. If we look at sort of that first statistic that I put around the asking the employees themselves around what devices they want to use. If you think about how to make your staff more proactive, you give them the tools that enables them to do what work they do best. So if we look at that from a performance point of view, a productivity point of view, with a choice program for those that need to that wish to use a PC can operate on a PC. For those that feel they're more effective using a Mac device, they can use a Mac device within there. So there's a factor around that. When we look at so that's around retaining talent, but actually looking at acquiring new talent, people fresh out university that perhaps only ever used an Apple device across their whole education journey, and then coming into a business, they may question around, I want to be able to use my Apple technology in my working life, because I spent the last 21 years of my childhood into work.
I think you say that, Jack. Actually, that fits quite well in what I've been doing, actually, because I see that all the time in education. You see the kids using these iPads. They've in secondary schools they've all got iPhones and Macs. So you're almost halfway there, and it's like if businesses can then jump on that bandwagon to actually bring that experience what the young people have got, because obviously they're going to move into the workplace. And I know I'm doing a lot of work with the iPads, particularly the iPads and the Macs in the schools. So absolutely. So in terms of the operation for the business, what's Apple going to bring to it? What's the Apple going to bring to the operating the business and making things maybe seamless?
So if we look at the whole, the consumer experience that we sort of built their foundations on, that idea of it just works, being able to take a device out the box and just use it for your personal use. When you look at how Apple operates within an organization, within a business, you've got zero-touch deployment models. The idea that you can actually take a brand new Mac device out of a box, take off the cellophane wrapper, and then turn it on. It knows what organization it is assigned to. It knows what applications that employee needs for their job. And actually, you remove the overheads of having to set up these devices, especially now we're in hybrid work environments. So perhaps yourself that's at home, you receive a new Mac. I'm in the office. There's a new Mac at my desk, but both of us have the same experience of taking it out the box. IT hasn't had to get involved. So there's a great benefit around sort of the staging of devices. But also when you look at from a security and privacy point of view, obviously built on the same methodologies around the iOS devices and iPadOS, the security and privacy being built into the Mac, knowing that you've got a far reduced attack vector using the Mac device with those native technologies. You also reduce the amount of security incidents, especially with more and more next-gen vendors providing that insight on Mac, the same way so a Mac can operate in the same way as its Windows counterparts. So for the security teams, they can still feel safe knowing that their Mac estate is as protected as if not more protected than their Windows estate.
So I know as an iPhone user myself, and I know the security for Apple is incredible. So I'm obviously that translates over to the Mac as well, and I know it does for the iPad. Just want to go back to we all have that experience. When we get a new iPhone, we get a new iPad, we get a new Mac. They do it so well where you open that box up and it's all packaged so well. I'm really curious to find out how does it happen where you open it and it's just connected to your business? I mean, how does that work?
So at the core of every Apple practice ecosystem is a platform called Apple Business Manager, which is a technology that's free. What it allows you to do is, as an organization, take ownership of your devices at a serial number level, actually have full control of that chain of custody. So you know that I have this iPhone, it's assigned to Jigsaw 24. and I can then pass that through to management. So with Apple Business Manager, you can control that device enrollment side. You can also control purchasing of applications, and all that stuff. Just that's a free technology. Now the next stage of that is MDM. So you would then assign Apple Business Manager to your MDM.
MDM stands for?
So for mobile device management.
Right. Okay.
So being able to enroll it into an MDM. That, as we said before, that chain of custody, it goes turn on, connect to the internet, or this device belongs to Jigsaw, it belongs to your organization. It then knows that it has to be passed to the MDM, and then that's where the zero touch magic takes place.
Right. So as a business, then do I have the administrators of the business or whoever administers the system? They can, if I wanted to buy as a user, I needed to have an app. How would I get that app? Would I just be able to download it, or is there a procedure for that via this MDM?
So there's different models. So obviously using Apple Business Manager, you can generate licenses for App Store content. Using MDMs, there's many different MDMs available, but quite a few have self-service capability. The idea of building your own App Store, because you as a business, you might go, actually, we use these 25 applications, and you make those available to your end users, and you can deliver that through MDM. Either as an automated sort of that out of the box experience, or having users be able to go to your central self-service and download those applications. Right.
Okay. What I'm keen to, because Jigsaw, we are a company that really does encourage green technologies. How does that fit with the Mac, the Mac and the Apple experience? I mean, at Jigsaw, we are very much into the green technologies, and obviously, I know Apple are. I'm assuming they're very keen on that.
Yes. So Apple made a statement that they've been carbon neutral since 2020. They're making an effort that by 2030 that all their products are going to be carbon neutral. When you look at the amount of recycled hardware that's within those devices, which links in to the fact that devices hold their residual value. So those that are leasing those devices being returned to Apple, all that hardware is then recycled, redistributed across the rest of the estate, which obviously reduces those overheads on the hardware itself. But also when you look at the power consumption around the new technology, such as the Apple Silicon M1 chip and the brand new M2 chip, when you look at that, how much power is used. If you have a fleet of PCs that you're plugging into your office electrics, they're all laptops, actually the power consumption on an M1 is dramatically lower. And when you scale that out across your business, you can actually see, well, the fact that these devices are more green, more energy efficient actually benefits us as a business, because we're not having to push out the same amount of power across all of our Apple devices.
So battery life is a huge thing then with Apple.
Yeah, absolutely. So the M1, again, with the more efficient battery, the more efficient processor, all that helps that, because everything's driven around user experience. So the idea that the same way you get the all-day battery life for your mobile devices that exists and beyond on the M1 devices. In fact, when the new M1 MacBook Air came out, I think I managed to get 2 days working in our London office, and I didn't even take the charger out of my bag. Wow. Which is we're a long way ahead of where the Intel Macs were, which you can see on the charts, but you see it on actually experiencing it on the devices themselves.
Right. I mean, that's a huge thing. I think that battery life, I mean, I can see how businesses could really benefit from that. I mean, you saying that it takes 2 days before you charge it. I mean, that's unheard of in the past, so it's fantastic. Okay. So let's just, I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm a customer. All right. And I've already got an estate of non-Mac devices, and I want to avoid causing my team further work with new platforms and stuff. But but I'm really keen to. This Apple solution seems to be, I'm getting some good vibes with it. What am I going to do to get the least amount of disruption to everybody in the business? I want to go for it, but I want to have the least amount of disruption.
So I think the most important thing when you're introducing Apple to a business, especially at scale that you may be offering choice, is that discovery element, that planning, doing your readiness assessment for that Apple estate, looking at, that's great, we want to have Apple technology in the hands of our employees. What do our employees, what do they do? Like, what applications are they interacting with? How many SaaS products are we using? Do we have anything around on-premise that we still rely on? I think looking at those sort of challenges and hurdles, and Jigsaw is able to help and support customers. This is something we do day in and day out for our professional services capability, whether that's guiding a customer through that whole readiness assessment of Apple for the business, to then pass it over, to hand the keys over at the end of that with everything they need to be up and running with Apple, or perhaps passing that through to a managed Mac where Jigsaw works alongside a customer to provide that managed Apple experience. But just the discovery element is fundamental to success, because if you look at the success of Apple in the past, it's around user experience. If we look at Mac's choice, it's because employees have had that experience in their personal lives with Apple. So when they look at their professional lives using Apple technology, there's an expectation that there's going to be that same user experience. So what you don't want to do is offer a choice program and then not be able to facilitate that same level of that sort of sleek, it just works, zero touch experience you'd expect with a Mac. And that's fundamental of avoiding disruption. What you don't want to do is just have the Macs out in the wild, not managed, not knowing how users are interacting, not knowing how to sort of service and support those devices.
Right. I mean, are there analytics on this as well? So, as a business, you can look at the analytics. So I'm assuming you can do that.
Yep. So with those, we mentioned about MDM. Some of the if we look at one of the leaders in the space, such as Jamf, you have Jamf Pro MDM, that allows you to get full insight as to what applications are on a device, how it's set up, the configuration. It also allows you to plug that into your Microsoft stack. So if you've got a team that are using the 365 platform for managing Windows devices, you can still plug Apple MDM technology into that, so that you have full insight as to what's happening across the estate, even on your Apple devices. So then if you want to make a change, you can still deliver that through MDM. So for example, if you're doing OS updates, you want to be able to know, are we all running the latest version of macOS? That's where MDM is able to pull that data through and then provide it to your teams.
Is that the same for apps as well? So you'd know what apps are on, what version of apps are on there?
Yes. So if you wanted to see what applications are installed on a device, what versions, or push out applications, that's where MDM sort of comes into play.
And on that note, you talk about Microsoft there. If I'm a user that's used to using PCs, I'm using Microsoft Office all the time. I might be using, Slack or apps like that. Does Mac run those apps as well as a PC does? Are there transferable apps across the board?
Yes. So if you look at the 365 suite of applications, all those exist across all those productivity applications work on a Mac as well as they do on a Windows. When you look at being able to have your staff interact with each other using different platforms, you can still do that within your 365 applications. Again, that comes back down to that discovery element on knowing what's happening within your estate. You also mentioned about the end user. We're talking here around operations and technology, but actually, if we look at enabling those users, because you've probably got an estate of employees that want to want to work on a Mac because they've used it before, but perhaps you have a growing estate of users that are seeing the success of Apple with their colleagues that may need that help, that transition to Apple. So we work with, and within your team, within professional services, enabling not just technical team, but that end user switcher training as well. So not only is it important to look at the technical and operational side, but actually what training is required for the IT team, what training is required for the end users. And that sort of, and was looking at self-service models. So actually being able to provide that information to end users to make that switch as straightforward as possible.
Yeah, I mean, and that is, like you say, that is my department in terms of how I support users with Apple devices, and it's the productivity side. I can see there's so much that people don't know on an Apple device. There is so much, and it's like a little light switch sometimes when you show somebody some little tiny light, something that is going to make their life so much easier, and then you show them that little thing. It's a very simple thing, and then suddenly their world has changed as a result of that. And I think there is so much on a Mac, there's so much on an iPhone and iPad that does that. There's just those, you don't know what you don't know. It's a cliche, I know, but it's, you don't know what you don't know. And that's what our department's about. It's about that, working with the users to make sure that they know the different productivity areas that is going to make them or help them and support them in their role that they're actually doing. So, that's, and obviously we work, my department works very closely with the rest of the team on that kind of stuff, and to ensure that the user experience is to the level that they want it to be, and open those doors that's going to ultimately make their life easier, because there is so much. And just one, and I know we're going to go into this in a webinar coming up, I think the third webinar, we're going to look at a few tips and tricks on how we can do things, but just simple things where you can be doing something on a Mac and continue doing that on an iPad or an iPhone. And like if I'm working on a document, I can literally go, I think it's called handoff, where you hand off to another device and you can continue with that document on that device. And it's just seamless. It's seamless. And I think that is what I find as a user so incredible about using Apple. It is seamless. I mean, I'm using now, if you saw my room at the moment, I'm using something called universal control, where I've got an external keyboard and a mouse, and I'm using two Macs, and I'm using the same keyboard and the same mouse on both Macs and an iPad. So I can switch between it, and it just works. And that's what, for me as a user of Apple technologies, that I love personally. Okay, thanks, Jack. There's a few more questions, a couple more questions that I want to ask. Really, it's let me have a look here. Right. So, can you give an insight of what it means for businesses? I mean, you may have touched on some of this already, actually, but can you give an insight what it means for business when choosing tools and services that are used on a Mac? Now, I know we may have touched on some of that already.
So we spoke around that, the impact to the end user. I think if you look at what applications you're using, does it require things like virtualization, where you look at some of the perhaps legacy Windows applications that can't run on a Mac? Are you then needing to buy virtualization software to have that work on a Mac, or has it got a native agent? If we look at things like security tooling, which famously has the biggest bearing on a device, I think it's important to look at what vendors you're working with, those application vendors, and going, when it comes to your Apple agent versus your Windows agent, how much is that a tick box that, yes, you can install it on a Mac, but it may not actually do a lot? Or is it that they've got Apple as an equal citizen for their application? And their security is a big area where that matters the most, because that can have the biggest bearing on whether or not that device is usable or not. So I think it's important to look at the vendors that you're working with, looking at what their Apple adoption is. If you look at things like macOS update cycles, how long does it take for the vendors and services that you work with to catch up with those releases? Because again, that will have a big bearing on both the operation and the IT side, as well as the end user.
Mm-hmm. And you and your team, you would spend that time with vendors and customers to actually make sure that they're going down the right routes and they're going down the right paths. Yeah.
Yeah. So we work with organisations of all sizes, whether we're talking to a small SMB with 20 employees, or we're speaking to a large enterprise that's doing a global Apple practice. Our solutions team can help run that conversation of looking at what applications are used, being able to make recommendations. Mm-hmm. And when you said earlier about what the next step would be in looking at Apple is to speak to one of our solutions teams, being able to speak to one of our account teams with a pre-sales consultant, just to talk around the technology and just see how it can work within the business. And that's something that we do to customers all day, every day.
So, I mean, actually, that you've preempted my last question there. Actually, Jack, is that what would be the next step? So that really clearly is the next step. If those that are on this call and watching this webinar, they need to get in touch. Obviously, they need to get in touch with us. They need to speak to us. They need to speak to your team and find out what the best solution is. And what the best route is in order to implement their Apple experience, basically. Yeah.
Yes. So just we can run things like workshops. Now we're able to come back into offices. We have our space in London, and we're able to run sessions with our solutions team if we want to do a hands-on. We also will be running our experience center sessions for customers soon to do proper hands-on. And actually, when we one of our ones before this and lockdown, when the MacBook 16 came out, we actually had a cellophane wrap box fresh from Apple, and one of the techies from one of our customers got to do that whole experience, and it was that zero touch of taking it out of the box and actually seeing it in person, which, especially when you're working with other stakeholders, is a great way to sort of get that message across, actually seeing it in person. Otherwise, it can be remote workshops, sessions with our solutions team.
Mm-hmm. I guess there's nothing better than actually being there in person. And now that we can do that, and I think, as a company, I guess we're encouraging that really to have a look and get your hands on, because that's the way that you're going to see the power of it. That's the way that you're going to see it working. Okay. So I think, I've asked all the questions that I've got on my list here, but I think we can really now open up to everybody on the call and see if there's any questions coming from anybody on that. Have we got any questions yet, James? Has anybody any come through yet? Or
not that I've seen. No, I've not seen a pop up. I guess, Anna, have you seen anything come through if I'm not looking in the right space? I'm guessing that's a no.
So if anybody, sorry, James. No, I was just saying, if anybody on the call has got any questions for either myself, Jack, or James here, then we'd be happy to answer any questions that you've got. So please use the have they got the ability to unmute their microphones, or does it need to be in the Q&A?
I think it looks like it needs to go through.
They can, but they have to raise their hand if they want to be unmuted.
Okay, so if anybody wants to ask,
people are feeling a little shy, so I think probably the best thing to do is I'll email everybody directly to share my contact details, and Rich and Jack's as well. I'll do that after the call this afternoon. And if there's anything that you want to talk about specifically, then feel free to contact myself or any of the guys that you've heard present today. One last chance before we draw to a close. Okay, well, look, thank you everyone for your time. Thanks, Rich, Jack, and Anna for organising. As I said right at the beginning, this is the first in 3 sessions, so please do join us on the following. So next week and the week after, you'll have seen I'm sure you've had the invites, but please feel free to join those. Also, one additional thing, we're just finalising the location, but we will be running a session in London on the 14th of July. Which will be in the afternoon, where it's a bit more hands-on. That will be a a follow-on from today, but also we've had the Jamf Nation conference recently, which is effectively Jamf's new product launches. That was on Friday, and immediately prior to that was Apple's what they call WWDC, which is the announcement of a whole load of new products, which you've probably seen. We will be running a session on the 14th of July that kind of brings Jigsaw's take on that. So again, I'd extend that invite out to everybody as well. But thank you very much for your time, and hopefully see you next week.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.